Polysecure, Attachment, Trauma, and Consensual Non-Monogamy. Written by Jessica Fern, read by Naomi Kirst-Schultz. Chapter 9, Part 1. The S in Hearts. Secure Attachment with Self. It is tremendously important to have relationships with partners where you are able to put into practice the heart of being polysecure. Being seen, understood, appreciated, and loved by another who is turning towards you with their presence and warmth is invaluable in its potential to offer the corrective attachment experiences that so many of us need. But healing attachment does not stop there. While I will not diminish the power that secure relationships with others have to heal our past and to bring alive our own secure ways, the establishment of a secure relationship with ourself is needed to fully embody healthy attachment with others, so much so that it requires its own chapter. When we have experienced attachment insecurity with caregivers, whether in childhood, in our adult relationships, or as disruptions in any of the levels discussed in the nested model of attachment and trauma, our primary relationship with ourself can become severed, and the development of certain capacities and skills can become compromised. Attachment ruptures and trauma can also leave lasting marks on our psyche, distorting our sense of self through the beliefs that we do not matter, that we're flawed, broken, unworthy, or too much, while simultaneously not enough. This is what needs to be repaired, and in many ways it is the only aspect of our healing that we are truly in control of, since the heart of being polysecure requires partners to practice with, and the other levels require group or collective-based processes that typically go beyond the individual level. Internal attachment healing is needed for the heart of secure functioning to become possible, and then take root in our relationships. Even in the most remarkably secure relationships, being together forever is not a given. Your lives might still take you in different directions. Partners can die, and even when partners are actively involved with you, it is unrealistic to expect them to be there for you every time you are in need. When we are relating from attachment insecurity, we can easily, and often unconsciously, put too much onto our partners. We can make our partners into the source of our hope, love, strength, ability to feel or regulate our own emotions, as well as the source of our meaning and purpose in life. Our partners can be the inspiration for these things, as well as be the objects or focus of our love, but they should not be the source of it. You are the source of your happiness, love, courage, emotional regulation, and purpose, and the sooner that you can release your partner from being the source of these experiences, the better for everyone involved, metamors included. Knowing how to stand securely on your own 2 feet and how to be your own safe haven and secure base is fundamental to building your internal secure attachment. I would say this to anyone practicing monogamy, but it is even more imperative in non-monogamous relationships. In polyamory, we need the internal security of being anchored in our inner strength and inner nurturer to navigate a relationship structure that is considerably less secure. Inner security is also imperative because depending on a certain partner as our only go-to support system regarding our relationship with another partner, a shared partner or one of their partners can be triangulating, messy, inappropriate, divisive, and even damaging. You must be a priority in your own life. Secure attachment with yourself means being aware of your feelings and desires, as well as being able to tend to your own needs and knowing how to advocate for them in relationships. In the absence of this, your relationships can be built upon a false premise, or, at the very least, will struggle to be sustainable. Earned secure attachment. Those of us who did not experience a securely attached childhood or who have had significant attachment insecurity from our adult relationships can still develop earned secure attachment. meaningful contact with teachers, friends, lovers, mentors, therapists, or other relatives who can empathically resonate and securely bond with us can all assist us in adjusting our attachment style towards becoming more secure. At the self level, one way to develop earned secure attachment is through making sense of your story. According to Daniel Siegel, we can make sense of our attachment history by creating a coherent narrative of our past experiences. We do this by putting together the story of what we went through as a child and examining how our attachment history impacts our present sense of self and our relationships today. By telling the stories that have been previously unspoken, we allow ourselves to feel what has been unfelt and bring love to what has seemed unlovable. When we are able to describe our painful past experiences and craft them into a narrative that makes sense to us, healing occurs and our brains can literally be rewired for more secure functioning. Daniel Siegel's research has also shown that the main predictor of a child's attachment style is not whether or not their parents had an insecure or secure attachment style, but whether or not their parents were able to make sense of their own attachment history. When parents had trauma and attachment insecurity, but were able to create a coherent narrative of what they went through, they were then able to break the cycle of attachment insecurity that can easily get passed down from one generation to the next, and instead parent their own child from an earned, secure stance. As adults, when we experience relationship traumas, painful breakups or losses, creating a coherent narrative about what happened is just as indispensable for our healing and integration. Non-monogamy can feature certain kinds of loss and breakups that don't happen anywhere else in our culture. In discussing why or how a relationship ended, we may not have the same common language that is used in describing monogamous endings, or encounter the same level of acceptance and understanding. You may have more partners who could support you post-breakup, and many people definitely benefit from this, but I also see people who feel even more isolated and alone when their non-monogamous relationship ends. Current partners may get tired of hearing about pain or drama from the relationship that ended, for instance, or it may be inappropriate to process the breakup with current partners. Perhaps they are involved with the partner you broke up with. You may also simply not have relationships that you would turn to for this kind of emotional support. The loss of relationships with metamors or entire polycules that result from a breakup can also be confusing, disorienting, and painful beyond measure. All of this can leave people feeling as if they are floating in outer space with no sense of what's up and what's down, nothing to ground them and help them move forward. In such cases, finding coherence to your story can be a profound support. When crafting the stories of your insecurely attached past, it is important not only to be able to describe and allow the feelings associated with what you've gone through, but to also develop an appreciation for the attachment survival adaptations that you took on. Our attachment styles are a result of our response to how available connection was to us. When connection is unavailable, inconsistent, intrusive, dangerous, or out of reach, the attachment system will either start to hyperactivate or deactivate as a survival strategy. Your attachment adaptations are what worked best in the environment that you were embedded in, and it is important to recognize the power and wisdom in the different styles that you constructed. As we give voice to our past, accept and allow our pain, and even appreciate the ways we were shaped from this, we are better able to take responsibility for the ways that we still need to grow and show up differently for ourselves and in our relationships. We no longer have to be victims of our past, but can be victorious in the face of it. Go heart yourself. The heart of secure functioning is not just for your relationships with partners, but can be directly applied to your relationship with yourself. H. Being here with myself. In order to create internal security, we must first inhabit our own being. We must fully occupy our bodies, which are the storehouse of our feelings, needs, pains, desires, and longings. When there has been attachment, insecurity, or trauma, being in your body may not be safe or easy, especially when habits of defensiveness, dissociation, or disconnection have been at play for years or decades. Traumas can limit our ability for presence. When we detach from ourselves, whether through pulling too far into ourselves or jumping too far out of ourselves into another, we lose access to our own internal states and therefore our own internal resources. We are not truly here in the moment, whether with ourselves or another. Being our own safe haven and secure base requires that we first have the capacity to be with ourself, to sit, to listen, to be available to whatever arises within us. Life occurs in the present moment, and our healing needs the fullness of our attention in the here and now to take place. Through embodiment, we can learn how to tolerate the uncomfortable feelings and sensations that might be necessary to move through in order to heal. We can also learn to allow positive sensations and feelings that might have been previously exiled. Questions to consider. In general, how comfortable or uncomfortable do you feel being alone with yourself? What are the subtle and overt ways that you avoid being present with yourself? What does being present with yourself mean to you? How would it look? What does being more embodied mean to you? How would that look? If you were more present and embodied, what possibilities in your life or relationship could open up? Things to try and experiment with. Mindfulness techniques and meditation practices. Body awareness practices, e.g. yoga, dance, walking meditation, body scan meditations. Breath work. Emotional or energetic grounding techniques. Working with a somatic practitioner or body-based psychotherapist. Taking a walk or a drive without making calls or listening to anything. Sitting with yourself quietly and allowing yourself to be with whatever arises. Singing or chanting when you're by yourself without worrying about how you sound. E. Expressed delight for myself. When applying the attachment need of expressed delight to yourself, we are talking about an inner sense of joy, appreciation, and pleasure in your own being and existence. As children, it is through mirroring, reflection, and the expressed delight from our attachment figures that we are able to develop a positive sense of self and learn what we are capable of. As adults, we still need this, and will typically get this through our closest relationships. When another is able to mirror us and take delight in who we are, we can get to know ourselves even more than we did before. But as adults, our positive sense of self cannot be solely contingent on the expressed delight of those around us. We need to cultivate expressed delight for ourselves in order to maintain a positive sense of worth and healthy appreciation for who and how we are that is sustainable and resilient. Imagine making a mistake, and your response to yourself is one of understanding and forgiveness. Imagine looking in the mirror and having thoughts of acceptance and self-compassion. Imagine looking forward to having some solo time because you enjoy time with yourself and are even pleasantly entertained with who you are. For those of you having flashbacks of the Saturday Night Live comedy skit where the character Stuart Smalley looks adoringly in the mirror at himself as he says, quote, "I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me," unquote. Don't worry, I won't suggest looking in the mirror as you say positive affirmations to yourself. I am talking about the importance of positive self-talk and being kind and loving to yourself in ways that you would probably treat a friend, but so frequently forget when it comes to your relationship with yourself. When we have experienced trauma and attachment ruptures, we can forget what it means to be kind to ourselves. Even a small shift in the way you talk to yourself has significant physical and mental health benefits and can influence your ability to regulate your feelings, thoughts, and behavior under stress. Positive self-talk is not about placating yourself, trying to falsely boost your ego, or being self-delusional. It is about having an inner dialogue that is forgiving, understanding, flexible, and holds a larger, often more realistic perspective than the negative, defeated, or abusive self-talk that we often tolerate as the inner status quo. Expressed delight for yourself would mean being able to see your strengths, positive attributes, qualities, and ways of being that you can be proud of and grateful for, as well as seeing where there is still room for self-improvement. When we delight in our children or our partners, we don't necessarily see them as perfect. In fact, we usually see them with all their amazing, difficult, and quirky qualities and choose to take delight in their fullness, contradictions and all. Can you do this for yourself? I see the inner critic and shame as the largest obstacles to rewiring our inner narratives to reflect more self-expressed delight. Trauma and insecure attachment give birth to our inner critic and shame, and just as positive self-talk has health benefits, negative self-talk can have far-reaching negative impacts on our health and can actually activate our threat system, spiraling us into the fight, flight, freeze, appease response, just from our own thinking. It is difficult to embody self-worth when we have parts of ourselves that incessantly beat us up for what we've done, what we haven't done, or how we look. The inner critic is the voice in our head that is harsh, mean, critical, unsympathetic, punishing, shaming, and quote-unquote shoulding. Shame is the part of us that feels beat up by the inner critic, accepting what it says as true, and believing that we are unworthy, not enough, too much, fundamentally broken, and maybe even better off dead. Shame researcher Brené Brown makes the important distinction between guilt and shame, with guilt being the perspective that I've done something wrong, which can be helpful and motivating, and shame the perspective that I am wrong, which can be debilitating and paralyzing. When we have critical or perfectionistic parts of ourselves that spew inner negativity, and then shameful parts that absorb these thoughts as gospel, finding love and happiness in ourselves can feel nearly impossible. I've come to see our inner critic as a form of emotional autoimmunity. When someone has an autoimmune condition, the immune system goes into overdrive and the body starts attacking itself instead of protecting itself from outside invasion. When we inquire into the motivation of the inner critic, it is usually a part of us that wants to protect us, keep us safe, or have us be successful, but its methods are actually self-harming and counterproductive to its protective intention. Shame is like a weakened immune system that will catch an emotional cold through even the smallest of insults, neutral feedback, or questioning from another. Even though the part of us experiencing shame often feels powerless, it is quite powerful in its capacity to eclipse our ability to connect with ourself and with others. Shame can function like a form of deflated narcissism, where any and all phenomena in the world are taken as evidence for how you are not worthy, or how you are fundamentally failing, flawed, or broken. Both the inner critic and shame can sabotage our relationships, because when we are living from these parts, we are usually unable to relate authentically or take responsibility for our actions. But remember that we are more than these parts. The inner critical and shameful parts of us can have a prominent impact through the ways they shape and distort our view of self, other, and the world, and when in the driver's seat, these parts can create much havoc. But they are not the totality of who we are. Just as our attachment styles are not the fullness of who we are, these parts are also just an aspect of ourselves that can be healed and transformed. Therapeutic modalities such as compassion-focused therapy, narrative therapy, and internal family systems use techniques to externalize and engage in dialogue with these parts to gain a better understanding of the ways in which they are either trying to protect us or are still holding pain, traumas, and emotional burdens that can be released. When doing this kind of inner work, the grip that these parts have on us begins to loosen, and more expressed delight can begin to shine through. As problematic parts get revised, unburdened, updated, or transformed, other parts of ourself that have been disowned or exiled, such as our self-esteem, our voice, our joy, enthusiasm, or creativity or sexuality can also be reclaimed and integrated, thus fortifying our ability to better enact the strategies and positive self-talk that encourages self-interest, excitement, play, and self-delight. It is just as important to cultivate the parts of us that can have self-compassion and help us function in securely attached ways as working with our critical and shameful parts, and I will touch on this in the next section. Questions to consider. What does expressed delight look like for you right now? How could you increase your self-expressed delight? Do you struggle with critical and shameful inner parts that sabotage your ability to value and appreciate yourself? What would become more possible for you in regard to yourself and your relationships if expressed delight was more central to your inner experience? Things to try and to experiment with. Take yourself on a date or pamper yourself with something that you genuinely enjoy. Listen to self-hypnosis tracks or positive affirmations that are aligned with what you want to feel about yourself. Write yourself a love letter or make a list of all the things you appreciate about yourself. Start a gratitude practice and make sure to include yourself as the object of gratitude. Start working with your inner critic and shame through modalities such as internal family systems, narrative therapy, or compassion-focused therapy, which focus on inner parts work. Check out Rick Hanson's Hardwiring Happiness or Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural, which both focus on how to create positive changes within your inner landscape. Start to identify the parts of you that do function in secure ways and focus on how to make them more prominent in your life. What daily practices or perspectives can you take on that bring your preferred expression of self more to the front and center in your life? Let yourself laugh and seek out humor. A. Attuning to yourself. Attunement is at the heart of secure attachment. In its absence, attachment security ceases to be possible. When there are early childhood attachment ruptures, requisite developments in a person's ability to tune into themselves and regulate their inner states can become hindered. When our childhood needs are not met from the outside, and our attachment figures are unable to help us learn how to identify and label our inner experiences in order to make sense of them and soothe ourselves. As adults, we can then struggle with knowing how to feel our own feelings, identify our own needs, and calm down our own body, mind, and heart in the way a nurturing caretaker would have. We can also run into considerable relational difficulty when we continue to have an quote-unquote outside-in approach to getting our needs met, expecting that our partners act as a substitute for our own inner nurturer. When we are able to tune in and tend to our needs from the inside first, we may still seek outward support, comfort, and guidance from our partners, but our fundamental well-being and sense of being okay are not dependent on it. When applied to the self, attunement is our ability to turn inward in order to become receptive and aware of our interior world. Self-attunement is the inner inquiry into what you are feeling, needing, thinking, and experiencing. Self-attunement facilitates self-knowing, which furthers our ability to self-regulate and soothe our own physiological and emotional states, as well as respond appropriately to our environment. Regardless of a person's specific attachment style, people with attachment insecurity will all struggle to some degree with emotional regulation and self-soothing. People with more attachment anxiety tend to seek outward regulation from others. They want to be taken care of, try to over-process with partners, look for someone to fix or take away what they're going through, or even seek someone else to just tell them what to do. People with an anxious attachment style can struggle with being able to hold and sit with their own feelings, and so, like a game of emotional hot potato, they try to pass off their emotions to their partners in order to diffuse their own discomfort. Seeking this external regulation from others is often at the exclusion of their own self-regulation and their own sense of self. People functioning from a dismissive attachment style steer clear of trying to emotionally regulate with others because, in many ways, they don't even see it as a possibility. The co-regulation that a child needs and would experience with an attachment figure was not available to them, so they learn to take care of themselves by disengaging from others and taking space to regulate. From the outside, it may look like people with avoidant attachment are able to self-regulate well, since they are comfortable on their own. But usually they're not actually self-attuning and self-soothing so much as they are auto-regulating, that is, partaking in activities that are more about zoning out or tuning out in order to dissociate from their internal states than tuning into and intentionally working with their internal states. And here I'll attach Table 9.1 in the book titled Types of Regulation, adapted from Stan Tatkin's The 4 Regulation or Self-Care Strategies. This has been Polysecure, Attachment, Trauma, and Consensual Non-Monogamy, written by Jessica Fern, read by Naomi Kirst-Schultz. That was Chapter 9, Part 1, The S in Hearts, Secure Attachment with Self.